Hey guys, and welcome to the first in my videos of Introduction to Magic, How to Play Magic for Beginners. In this video, I'm going to be going over what keywords are. And keywords are the words on a card that tell you what the card does. So there's a number of important keywords in Magic that totally change how a card is played or how you should approach playing against certain cards, or even playing with certain cards. The list that I'm going to go over today is Flying, Reach, Lifelink, Haste, First Strike, Double Strike, Trample, Indestructible, Hexproof, Flash, Menace, Vigilance, Deathtouch, and Defender. These are the keywords that appear most often on cards that you'll be playing with in Standard on Magic Arena. They also appear most often just in general in Magic the Gathering across its entire history, spanning all of the sets in paper. So without any further lingering, let's begin. So flying is one of the most common and one of the most powerful keywords in the game. All it does, it simply allows for this creature to be unblockable by creatures without flying or without reach. If you have a creature with flying, they will fly above other creatures on the ground and hit them from the air. Only other flyers can block them or other creatures that have reach. Reach does not give the creature the ability to become a flyer, however it does give them the ability to block flyers. Most creatures with reach are archers or walls, and are given some lore reason that ties into the card as to why they are able to basically knock flyers out of the air. Flying is one of the most powerful keywords you can have, and is often found in blue and white, although black and red will have flyers as well, often dragons or phoenixes for red, or large demons for black. Black also gets a number of smaller flyers in bats and occasionally shades, but those are usually much less than the huge amount of flyers that white and blue get, usually at fairly low mana costs. Next up, we have Lifelink. Lifelink basically allows for any damage that a creature does to also be given to your life total. So if you control this Mesa Unicorn here that does 2 damage, and as lifelink, you will gain 2 health every time that the Mesa Unicorn deals damage to another creature or to another player. Conversely, if your opponent has a lifelinker, they will regain health when their creature does damage. Lifelink usually appears in white. Most other colors don't have access to lifelink. Black does sometimes get it, but for the most part, white gets lifelink, with green and black occasionally getting access to it. Next up, we have Haste. So Haste is, for anyone that plays Hearthstone, just like Charge. It allows a creature to come down and ignore Summoning Sickness, so you don't have to wait till your next turn to be able to tap that creature either to attack or to activate any other abilities that require tapping. You can simply attack with it or tap it the moment it comes down onto the board. That's what Haste does. It's very powerful, especially in aggro decks, because it allows for a creature to attack the second it hits the board without having to wait. It can also be pretty good if you have a deck that relies a lot on tapping creatures for various synergies or effects, as you don't want to wait until your next turn to be able to tap the creature you just placed. First Strike is essentially there's 2 different phases where damage is dealt in combat after blockers has been assigned. First Strike is basically the creature sucker punches the opponent to start the fight off. Here, the Reckless Racer would sucker punch the creatures blocking him or the creatures that he's blocking to deal 2 damage, and then they would deal their damage to him. Following up on that, Double Strike allows for them to both sucker punch and then deal regular damage. So you can sucker punch them to get the fight started, and then hit them again for another 2 damage with the Scrapper Champion when the fight is actually going on and damage is dealt. If this Reckless Racer and Scrapper Champion fought, the Reckless Racer and the Scrapper Champion would both deal 2 damage to each other to start the fight during the first strike damage phase. Then, the Scrapper Champion would be dead after that because Reckless Racer has 3 health, Scrapper Champion only has 2. But if you gave Scrapper Champion extra health, so they're both 2/3s, they'd both be 2/3s but down at 1 health for the turn because they'd both been dealt 2 damage, and then Scrapper Champion would get to deal normal damage as well, so that Reckless Racer would lose another 2 health and die. So without any extra +1/+1s, both of these deal first strike damage. Scrapper Champion dies, give Scrapper Champion any extra health whatsoever, and she gets to deal damage a second time with Double Strike, and Reckless Racer dies. Double Strike is very powerful in combo builds, as any +1/+1 counters or buffs that you give to a creature with Double Strike basically apply twice, as the Double Striker gets to hit twice. So Double Strike is very cool for combo builds or for creatures that have slightly lower attack totals but have Double Strike, giving them extra basically extra power, will deal, you get a lot more value out of it basically than you would for other creatures. Following up, we have Trample. Trample is essentially when a creature deals damage, any excess damage is lost. If I was using this Peema Outrider to deal with, say, the Reckless Racer, the Peema Outrider only deals 2 of its 3 damage to the Reckless Racer, and that other damage is lost. For a much more extreme example, if this Peema Outrider was a 10-10, and it hit the Ornithopter, a 0-2, 8 damage would be lost. However, Trample allows for any extra damage to be carried over and applied to either the player or any of the planeswalkers they control. So this Peema Outrider, if it dealt 2 damage to kill the Reckless Racer, or the Ornithopter rather, it needs 3 to deal with the Reckless Racer, it would use 2 to kill the Ornithopter, and that final point of power, the 3rd point of damage, would then be applied to the opposing player. Trample is often found in green, and is very good if you have a couple big creatures, and the opponent has a lot of small creatures, as blocking a normal big creature with a small creature is very good to keep the creatures from hitting your face. However, with Trample, they're required to sacrifice a lot more creatures if they don't want to take the damage to the face. Following up from Trample, we have Indestructible. So Indestructible is, there's not very many creatures that have it actually. In fact, you can see Zetalpa Primal Dawn does have it, but Zetalpa has so many keywords that you can't actually see all of them. But what Indestructible does is basically exactly what it says on the tin. Indestructible, so if I just search here, allows for effects that say destroy don't destroy a permanent with Indestructible, and if it's a creature, it cannot be destroyed by damage. However, there are ways to kill indestructible creatures. If you exile an indestructible creature using any effect that says exile, that creature will be exiled. It doesn't get a chance to be indestructible because exiling is not destroying. Similarly, if you apply -1/-1 counters to it, it still gets these applied to it. And death is a state-based action in Magic the Gathering. That's a bit more advanced topic. Basically what it means is if a creature has 0 toughness because it has, in the case of the Seraph of the Suns here, 4 -1/-1 counters on it, then it will die because it has 0 toughness. Indestructible just means that if its toughness is not 0 and is brought below 0 for the turn, or 2-0, due to damage, it won't die due to the damage applied. You can still, however, put on 4 -1/-1 counters to kill the Seraph of the Suns, or just give it -4/-4 for the turn to kill it as well. Hexproof is the next big keyword, and Hexproof is a very powerful keyword. In fact, it's probably one of the most powerful keywords available, and as such, it's also one of the most limited keywords available. Hexproof means that this creature cannot be targeted by spells or abilities your opponents control, which means if your opponent tries to Lightning Strike it, Fatal Push it, if they tried to use Destined on it, none of that would be able to target the Vine Mare. Hexproof can also be used as there are spells that give Hexproof. So one of the most common spells that gives Hexproof is, if I go to green here, Blossoming Defense. And this gives Hexproof until end of turn. One of the big tricks you can use with Hexproof, especially with stuff such as Blossoming Defense here, is if you have your Peema Outrider here, and you're swinging to attack, and the opponent tries to Lightning Strike him, and Lightning Strike deals 3 damage. If you use Blossoming Defense on your Peema Outrider, then Peema Outrider will gain Hexproof, and if you use it in response, Blossoming Defense will go on the stack and come out first before Lightning Strike can resolve. When Lightning Strike tries to resolve, it finds that Peema Outrider is Hexproof and is not a valid target, and will thus fizzle, not casting the spell at all. So your Peema Outrider gains the benefit of the +2/+2 from Blossoming Defense, gains Hexproof, and doesn't take any damage from Lightning Strike. So Hexproof can be used to huge effect by granting it to a creature that doesn't have Hexproof to avoid a powerful spell from your opponents. Flash is another pretty powerful spell, keyword, that gives any spell that has Flash, basically makes it into an instant. This Torrential Gearhulk can be cast at any point during your turn or an opponent's turn. In combat, before combat, after combat, it can be cast at any point. And that's a very powerful ability to have. Instants are some of the most powerful spells in the game. A lot of the most broken spells in Magic's history are instants. And being able to flash in a creature or an enchantment anytime you could cast an instant really breaks the rules of the game in some really fun and creative ways. A very obvious example for flashing is if they're attacking and you have no creatures on the board, you could flash this Torrential Gearhulk in as a blocker to destroy one of their creatures and put your own creature on the board. It's very powerful, and as such, only really blue and sometimes white get access to Flash. Flash is not a keyword they spread around, very similar to Hexproof, which really only goes to green and sometimes blue. After Flash, we have Menace. Menace, it's a very simple keyword. A creature with Menace cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. This has a few applications. The biggest applications for this are creatures with Deathtouch, which I'll explain in a second, but essentially Deathtouch means if this creature does damage to another creature, that creature is destroyed. So Menace, it can allow creatures with Deathtouch to get a lot more value out of having Deathtouch. Creatures with huge amounts of power, so if this creature was like a 10 power, 1 toughness creature, it would still be blocked by 2 creatures, even if the opponent did have a single 1/1 that they wanted to sacrifice to kill it. They would have to throw their 1/1 and their 5/5 at it if they wanted to block the creature and kill it. It's really good for aggro decks. It's usually found in black and red, and it's usually good early game because often the opponents don't have more than 1 creature, and if they do, they don't generally want to have to sacrifice 2 creatures, as usually even if they do have more than 1 creature, they don't have 2 creatures available that can both block efficiently and not die to whatever your creature with Menace is. After Menace, we have Vigilance. So Vigilance is attacking doesn't cause a creature with Vigilance to tap. It will still tap if you have any effects that say tap this creature to do X, but attacking will not cause a Vigilance creature to tap. This is pretty powerful with creatures that do have abilities that force them to tap. Can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there's a lot of creatures that when you tap them, actually Sanctions I believe can do it. So Angel of Sanctions, no, not her. There's a few various angels I believe that can, when they tap, so here we go. Angel of Condemnation. So you can see one of the costs for her 2 abilities requires you to tap Angel of Condemnation. Because she has Vigilance, if you swing in with Angel of Condemnation, you can still tap her to exile another target creature on the board, either your opponent's or your own, or to exile another target creature until Angel of Condemnation leaves the battlefield. So Vigilance is pretty good for that, or just keeping creatures up and swinging for damage without giving up on the ability to block. Vigilance, it's not the most powerful keyword, but it's always appreciated when you have it on a creature. Usually Vigilance is given to white creatures, with some green creatures also getting it. Next up, we have Deathtouch. So Deathtouch is, like I explained, any amount of damage a creature with Deathtouch deals to a creature is enough to destroy it. This usually isn't great on creatures such as Tetsamok Primal Death here, as with 6 power, he's already going to destroy most creatures that he fights. However, it is very good on smaller creatures with Deathtouch. So Narnam Renegade here is only a 1/2. But late game, if you use him as a blocker and he blocks something really big, like a Torrential Gearhulk, then even though Torrential Gearhulk kills the Narnam Renegade also kills the Torrential Gearhulk, meaning a 1/2 just traded for a 5/6. So Deathtouch is pretty good on creatures, smaller creatures that want to just swing in uninterrupted, or like I already mentioned, creatures with Menace, or creatures that can force multiple other creatures to block it, as the more damage you have to spread around other creatures, the more creatures you'll kill thanks to Deathtouch. Finally, the final keyword I'm going to go over is Defender, and Defender is pretty simple. A creature with Defender can't attack. That's all it is. A Defender usually has 0 or very little attack, usually like 0 to 3, and usually has higher toughness for its cost. As you can see, this Wall of Vines here has 3 toughness, which is pretty much the maximum toughness they would print for a 1 mana cost creature. As a result, it has 0 power, but it is decent for blocking early game creatures, as a 0/3 will block most 1-drops and a number of 2-drops, as well as having reach to block flyers early game. Defender isn't always that good, but with one of the brand new creatures in the game, Arcades the Strategist, Defenders do have a few little tricks they can play. Arcades here allows for when a creature with Defender enters the battlefield, you can draw a card, and each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness. There's a number of enchantments and other stuff similar to that you can use to make a Defender deck work, but generally Defenders are just used in slower ramp decks or control decks to allow the deck to get to late game against aggro decks who want to swing in with smaller 1 to 3 power creatures. Anyways, guys, those are the most common keywords you are going to run into when playing Magic the Gathering. The most powerful, in my opinion, are generally Flying, Double Strike, Indestructible, Hexproof, and Flash, with First Strike, Trample, Vigilance, and Deathtouch being other more powerful abilities. Lifelink is a very powerful ability in its own right, but generally most creatures with Lifelink, it's something extra stapled on. All of these keywords will come up fairly often in your games of Magic, so try to understand them and become proficient in them sooner rather than later. However, you will find yourself using a lot of flyers fairly often in white and blue decks. You'll find yourself using a lot of tramplers in green decks. If you play blue, you're probably going to find some flash cards. If you play black, you're probably going to find Menace or Deathtouch. And white usually gets First Strike, Indestructible, as well as a few other effects. So don't worry too much about them. You will learn them as you play Magic. Anyways, guys, this was the first video in Intro to Magic. Hope this video is helpful to you. Subscribe if you liked it, and have a good one.